Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because conscience tells him it is right.
Every time our country stands in the path of danger, an instinct seems to summon her finest first, those who truly understand her. When freedom shivers in the cold shadow of true peril, it's always the patriots who first hear the call. When loss of liberty is looming, as it is now, the siren sounds first in the hearts of freedom's vanguard.
Fighting for humanity and against globalism, one mind at a time. It's the Freedom Link with Joe Joseph.
Well, hello, everybody. Yes, the 13th of January, 2024. Scotty and Joe here. And man, I'll tell you what, it's been a very, very interesting couple of weeks since we've been on last. And a lot of things have happened, and a lot of things continue to happen. It's becoming more and more chaotic. It's becoming more and more dire. At least you'd like to say, Scotty, that it's a product of the news and the fear mongering and the stuff and the things, but it's not. It's because of the real life situation that's kind of unfolding, and they can't hide it anymore.
That is a fact. And, right. Yeah, I'm still kind of blown away by some of that stuff you sent me before the show that we'll get into here in a little bit with the debt and
dude, it's nuts. It's nuts.
That visual representation of it is.
I don't think people understand that there's a point
wild.
coming. There's a point coming in the near future where they can't kick the can down the road anymore. The can's been kicked and kicked and kicked, and they're going to have to do something because. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight a little bit. And the fact that they used to be able to call those that pay attention to the things in the minutia or the things that happen behind the curtain, that take the extra time to read peer-reviewed articles and the things that happen in academia, and kind of study the trends. Because if you notice trends, if you can develop, like do a trend analysis and see how things are, you can kind of predict the future in a way. We use it a lot in manufacturing. You do trend analysis to see, well, hey, did this fix that we did it take? And if so, do we know if we're going to have a higher probability of success or not? And that's the thing. It's all about probabilities. So
it's the basic, it's sort of the basic thing that us humans have always been good at, and it's pattern recognition, right? And if you start to spot a pattern over a period of time, then you go, oh, okay, well then this is the trend that this is going in, and you can extrapolate that out into the future, and
and manage risk.
Not all the time, but a lot of times you'll end up being right about it, and so
and we all do it. Okay. And we all do it. We manage risk. And quite frankly, it's an important facet of human life, but it's one that as time has gone on, people have become much more aware. And I dare I say more desperate. And in doing so, have had to kind of develop a risk management mentality, to have that awareness because things have gotten so out of control. Back in the 70s and 80s, I mean, I was a young kid in the late 70s or in early 80s, and I'll tell you this: I remember waiting with my mother in line on the days when our license plate number came up and we could go get gas. And we would be in line for 4 hours. And to me, that was great. I loved playing with my Tonka truck in the back of a 72 Buick Riviera, and who wouldn't? So it was something that at that age never really affected me too much, but I can tell you it affected a lot of people. When you look at um, mortgage rates being at 15%, that was crazy. At that time priced a lot of people out of the market. The difference being that the cost of housing wasn't near as high relative to people's salaries. So that was the major difference. There's a lot of major differences and a lot of things that the media is putting out there to make you feel like you're crazy. And so tonight we're going to try to decompress from that and help you understand just how not crazy you really are. But that what you're seeing is actually manifesting before your eyes is the true state of things, is what is real, what's going on. We'll even get
Right. I
into
mean,
go ahead.
well, they want you to deny what's in front of your eyes. They want you to deny what's blatantly in front of your face and that you can see. And um, they're trying everything they can to gaslight people and to uh, you know put on this circus show that everything is okay and that everything is fine, and if you point out the obvious, then hey, you're the crazy one, right? So it's wild, but like you said, I mean, it's all coming apart. They can't maintain this facade any longer, and it's just, with the collapse of the um, dying dinosaur mainstream media. Nobody really listens to them anymore, and most of the information flow right now is done online. Um, you really don't have, I would say, a significant portion of the population that really receives their daily news from the television
No,
anymore.
no. I saw a striking
And
statistic. I saw a striking statistic to your point. And you make a correlation between what you're saying and how many people buy into, say, the party system, the political party system, i.e., I am a Democrat, I am a Republican. You now have a 43% of the U.S. voter population that now believes them to be independent, and that is the highest it's ever been. Um, and that tells you something. That tells you that they identify people who do not buy into the false left right paradigm, or maybe they do, but they're sick of it. Uh, they're just they're not going around or following the crowd or what they deem as the lesser of two evils. They're
right.
starting to see or develop their own worldviews, which is good. To me, that's good. You need to have that. You can't live in an echo chamber. It's not good. Now, they will use, and I say those that are in power will always try to stay in power, right? And so here's a comment from one of the listeners. Before they crash the economy, I see them doing the false flag EMP, then say we have no idea your dollar's worth, but here's a government ID chip and here's your social credit score. Now, I will say this: social credit score, um, they use China, the beta test, right? China showed that it can be implemented, that it can um, work to control things. As a matter of fact, China is using AI to basically run society in many facets. That doesn't mean they're being successful in doing it. However, it's a test ground, right? It's there.
Yeah, and let's be honest, we also have our own form of a soft sort of social credit score
Oh yeah,
here
here, yeah,
in
sure.
the United States, right? And our um I would say our version of a social credit system is more based off of, what would you say, social pressure, the mob mentality, and if you don't, adhere to a certain standard, then you end up becoming deplatformed. You get canceled. You
Yes, you
start
can't
getting
travel.
you can't travel. So I mean that's there's all it's so yeah we have our own form of a social credit system. It's just implemented in a different way here in
And
the
funny,
U.S.
and it's funny. Let me say this. Okay, so the control freaks. Let's put this together a little bit. This is kind of interesting. So 1900 or so, 1900 or so, you had a big push with the endowments and a lot of high level academics, Rockefeller Foundation type stuff, right? And so one of their biggest things that they were into at that time was eugenics. And eugenics was viewed as a way to use genetics to bring about a perfect society. That was kind of the idea. That started well before World War II and Hitler and all of that stuff. But Hitler was proving ground 1.0 for a lot of these ideas for these control freaks. That's who they were at that time. Those endowments, those high level people that still are here today, the ones that Bernays talked about, the small group of dominant men that control the world, and it's still that way today. And so what happens? They install one of their own as the CEO of IG Farben, Paul Warburg, and they go about running these tests on a captive population, being the Jews and any other political prisoners that they put in their concentration camp system. And they did all sorts of experimentation. Everybody knows the name Joseph Mengele and all the things that he did. You know about how IG Farben perfected mass extermination techniques and experimented on the Jews there. So yes, the Holocaust happened. Yes, all these things happened. Of course they did, but it was as a proving ground. It was to perfect the eugenics the underlying push for the war. It was an experiment. Right. And Johnny Mnemonic in the chat room says it's Bayer. Bayer Pharmaceuticals is IG Farben in World War II. So then you kind of
Yep.
come on now to this time, and you have the same thing happening, identical thing happening in China, where now you have concentration camps and you have political dissidents and you have the Uyghur population who are now being used for medical experimentation, for organ harvesting, for all sorts of things that you can't get away with or can't do to advance that research to create what they envision as the perfect world, to basically replace God. That's the whole thing behind it all, is to be God. They view themselves as more powerful than the creator himself. And so they want to get to that point. That's why there's such a push for immortality and all that stuff. Well, guess what? China right now is their test bed. And that's why this facade that goes on with all this trade and currency and, issues that we face, geopolitical issues, do they have to be happening? No, but they are. That's not to say that these people aren't working and friends behind the scenes. We know this. We know this, right? And we also know that a lot of it is fake and theater. How? Well, let's take China's last visit here to the United States. So, Chairman Xi goes to San Francisco for a summit. And San Francisco used to be one of the most, if not the crown jewel city in the United States. And wouldn't you know it, now it is overridden by homeless, by people that are, hooked on all sorts of different drugs, that, there's poop and pee and everything all over the streets. And it's a real mess, to the point where a lot of businesses are leaving and fleeing San Francisco. But when Chairman Xi went, In 24 or 48 hours, they were able to clean up the entire city. They were able to enforce everything the way it was, and everything was fine. Now, does that mean that they solved the problem in 48 hours? No. But what it showed us was everything that happens current state, because as soon as she left, everything got moved back again. Everything
Right.
was back to the way it was. What it means is they could fix the problem if they wanted to, but they choose not to. They're choosing to do the things to make tension and to create torment and division and everything, because through that they can control us. So they have to do this. Interestingly enough, um, we have some stuff tonight on immigration that we're going to talk about. And all of that's very important too, because, one thing that you'll hear all the time is, well, we're a nation of immigrants. Um, and you would be correct. We are. But there's a certain way things are supposed to be done in order to keep the system from imploding on itself.
Yes, there's a difference between the way things were being done in the 1800s as far as immigration goes, and the way that things are being done now as far as
Yeah.
We're two totally different sort of aspects of how it's being done, and the reasoning behind it also,
Well,
is
you're
completely
absolutely
different.
right. You're absolutely right. So I think we should probably let's start off with this little piece here. I thought was pretty interesting. Is um, you have Illinois Governor Pritzker, who's urging Governor Abbott in Texas to stop the busing of migrants to Chicago. Uh, and he says, "I plead with you for mercy. This is due to the storm." And it is in part because of the extreme cold weather, right? And they are putting people on buses right now to sleep because they've run out of shelter space. And he's pleading for mercy for these people, but at the same time, nothing is being done to stop the influx, the flow into the United States. And that's a big problem.
Right. The
That the,
person he should be pleading for mercy is he should be stating that to Joe Biden
and
for
and they have,
allowing.
they all have, they all
Yes,
have. And everybody's upset, but see, because of
and
that party
Congress for
allegiance,
not doing anything about it. For
because of the
yeah.
party allegiance, and because of the fact that they are trying to bring about a crisis and foment chaos to bring about control, to bring about their plan, he has to suck it up. And they're showing
Right.
now more than ever that they can't do that, right? So he's urging that.
Look,
Meanwhile, oh, go ahead,
when
say it.
when
I'm going to
you've
set up the next graphic.
Right. When you've advertised yourself as a sanctuary city and you put on all this virtue signaling for all of these years, talking about how, hey, we're more than ready to welcome them in, and just whatever. But then whenever they had to actually deal with it, like when it came to put up or shut up, and these city, or Texas and all these border states were like, you know what, let's give you guys a little bit of a taste of what all of the cities on our southern, on these border towns have been having to deal with.
And you're right, it's a
And
taste.
it's just a taste. It's just a taste. So if they're getting that frustrated over these bus loads that have been coming in, imagine how frustrated the city officials and everybody down on these southern cities are. How frustrated they are,
It's beyond a
and the
crisis.
and the and the and the kind of burden and load that they're having to deal with at the detriment of their citizens. It's
That's right. That's right.
right.
It's terrible. So let's even bring this up. And this is one of the things that I want to talk about tonight, and one of the reasons why I think the tide is turning from a you see, like I say, government trust at an all-time low. You see the misery index just spiking. Here's an interesting fact: 93% of the stock market, 93% of the stock market is owned by the top 10%. So just let that sink in for a second. Because what you'll always hear is, I don't understand why people are so, the economy's doing great. And whenever they reference the economy's doing great, it always ties back to stock market performance. But
Right.
only 10% of Americans own the stock market or a stake in it, the top 10%. So, that's not to say that the bottom 90 don't own some. It's just so microscopic relative to the top 10% that, eh, you know? And so, of course,
The
if you're in the top
the
10%, you're doing
moves,
great.
yeah, the moves in the stock market are not reflective of anything that your average person is going to notice.
That's
The
right.
moves in the stock market are only noticed by people invested in the stock market.
That's right.
And it's that top, you know, that very top pyramid, group that really see, when there's big movements in the stock market, they're the ones that see the money coming and going and whatnot. But it's not an accurate representation of what the average person
No,
is
no,
dealing with. And
no.
so, yeah, you're right. People get caught in this trap of, oh, green arrow point up, that means economy is good. Oh, red arrow point down, that means economy is bad.
So
It's not necessarily reflective of the
it
general state
obviously is
of
not,
what's right,
right?
right.
It's
So
obviously not. So knowing that, just let that be our foundation as we begin.
right.
We've seen that the real estate has exploded, and they say, well, there's a shortage. There's a shortage of available housing on the market. Meanwhile, prices continue to climb due to unprecedented demand, even in the face of high interest rates and everything else. But what they don't tell you is, and this is where I really, you can't fault the baby boomer generation and the preceding generation, uh, because they really don't understand, and a lot of people don't. Like when you have a 401k and you're going into these funds, and all these funds say is, okay, well, if you want low risk and you're doing this for the long game, well, then you do this. Or if you're doing it in a short game and you need higher risk, well, then you do this. And all they are portfolios. And you just see a very high level overview of what that portfolio is. So you never get into the nitty gritty or the details of what those are. But companies like BlackRock and others have created huge funds, mutual funds, securities that are centered around uh, real estate, specifically residential. And over the last 10 years, they have sunk more money into the real estate market than you can even imagine. And they have artificially increased the pricing. They have basically bought it all up to raise the prices, not only of the market, but also of rent. And that's why housing now is unaffordable. And why do they
Yeah,
want to do that?
they've created an artificial scarcity of real estate.
Because remember
And
now, they
yeah.
are what their CEO is considered to be ESG centric. That is environmental social governance, right? So that is their mantra. That's their Bible, if you will. So if they do that and they can artificially create a scarcity and drive up the prices and create a crisis, they can bring about the solution that they want. Remember, that's kind of the way the Hegelian dialectic works. So you have this $10 trillion plus corporation, they own everything, and you are buying everything up, you're creating a scarcity. Meanwhile, you're creating a lot of tension by, look at this article here from InfoWars. Maine builds rent-free luxury apartments for illegal migrants paid for by U.S. taxpayers. Okay, so now I'm thinking that would probably piss me off a little bit because, and this is where this is where the immigration argument falls off the rails. Prior to 1870, we had no social safety net or any government assistance of any kind. Hell, it was 1913 before it really bit in. Okay. But 1870 is where the idea of the United States incorporating and becoming a corporation and creating the idea of citizenship and rolling that out, that's when immigration fundamentally changed, or had to change, if the United States was going to survive. And so it did. It shut the borders. It created this idea of citizenship. That's why you had Ellis Island. That's why you had um, quotas, let's just say. And even up to present day, there were always quotas, because you can't overwhelm the system with a lot of refugees. To do so will collapse it. You're seeing it over in Europe. You're seeing it here. Now, we have a lot of Americans that have been citizens from day one that are suffering right now, and would probably say that $3.5 million shouldn't be going to people that aren't citizens, nor have they paid into the system. That should be going to the people that are suffering that have.
I
And that,
was just about to say, if I was a homeless person in Maine right now, and
we
I
pissed.
saw that, yeah, and I looked over, and there was a bunch of illegal immigrants getting shacked up in luxury apartments and can stay up there rent free. Meanwhile, your own citizens are freezing on the streets and
Yep.
whatnot. Yeah, I'm
Okay,
sure
so
that
think
there's a
about
lot of.
this though. So you create a scarcity,
Mm,
right? Then
right.
you introduce policies like this. This isn't the only one that's happening. Right now, it's happening in Massachusetts. It's happening basically in every blue state, where Texas and other southern states have taken the onus and started busing them in to the United States. And let me say, it's a very small proportion of the overall number that are coming to the border every day. It is an unprecedented number that are coming. It is a refugee crisis. And, so there's the human side, which says that really every human being, we at the 21st century, by God, they deserve a home. Everybody. Can I tell you something? It's very easy to say that. We can all say that. We can all feel that. We can all feel emotional. It's another thing to actually make it happen. And in a time where greed and uh, debauchery and everything else runs supreme. I mean, look at, we're Sodom and Gomorrah present day. Uh, you can't see a really good solution or a really good outcome coming from this. But what I can tell you is that America 2030 is a very real plan. That is their ultimate goal. 2030 is their goal. And in doing so, one of the solutions that are going to be put out there is to do away with all private property. And when I say that, I mean that you own nothing, that you'll be given housing, and everybody will have standard housing. There will be houses for everybody, but it's going to be assigned housing. And they'll be able to control it because they've already proven the smart city technology. And they're deploying smart cities all over the world. As a matter of fact, a lot of these cities like Memphis, like Glasgow, like Dubai, like the new one that they're building out in Saudi Arabia, Neom, all of these smart cities are basically, the infrastructure is there to be able to utilize Internet of Things and that cutting edge RF technology to basically manage every facet of your life. And as things get more and more desperate, meaning that more and more people are homeless, you see, now you can't hide it. An EBT card can't mask poverty and hunger anymore, because you had that crisis at the turn of the century and before that, and charity was able to handle it. And then you had the Great Depression, and it overwhelmed things. And you had mile lines for soup kitchens. Well, guess what we have today? Miles and miles. You have lines for food banks, right? And you have uh, EBT systems that didn't exist during the Great Depression that do now, that help
And you
mask it
also have
and
to
bring it
you
down.
and you have to look at a lot of I would say the retail has shifted, uh, and how people aren't really going to your normal grocery stores anymore to get food, but now they're going to go get food over at a dollar store or a Dollar Tree or something like that,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And so whenever you've had to make the decision to shift your purchase, uh, shift your purchasing from a traditional
Hold
grocery store
on.
down to something like a dollar store
Yes,
or a
yes, make
Dollar
it quick.
Tree, um,
Go, go. Yeah, okay.
yeah, it
Got it, got it, got it, got it, got
definitely
it, got it.
is the
Yep.
brain
Oh,
on the
she's
move.
got it. Oh, yeah, she's got it. She's got it spot on. And she's right. Because think about this. Think about this. It is that it's replacement. If you can't get people to go along with you, and it's a 43% independent, you got to count like that. Oh my God, people are thinking for themselves again. We can't have this. We have to have a new constituency if that's the case, ones that are going to come along and play ball with the plan. And if they don't, well,
Right.
then we're going to get people that will play ball with the plan. You see, the thing that I see happening though is it's happening too fast and they can't handle it. See,
Right.
that's the issue. It's very easy to say everybody deserves housing, everybody deserves health care, everybody deserves this, everybody deserves that. Yes, of course. I would love to see that. We'd all like to sing Kumbaya for God's sake. But let's be real. It's a lot harder to make it manifest, you know? To get the natural resources required to do that is a big lift. That requires a lot of funding that we just don't have anymore because we've spent it all pandering to special interests, the military industrial complex, and you name it. Now we can't afford it. And it's starting to show. You think it's starting to show now? Wait, wait. This is going to be a very interesting thing, Scotty. And I say that, and it's scary too, because they're going to be forced to make some really tough decisions, but at the same time, utilize some things that are going to make him walk a very, very, almost like a tightrope. If you think about the debt and how fast it's going
They're
to
gonna have to. They're
accelerate.
they're definitely gonna be walking on a knife's edge and trying to balance this thing as delicately as possible, because if it tips one way, it's gonna come crashing down extremely quickly. You
But
know.
could you imagine? Could you imagine? And would you say, or could you see a scenario where it gets so bad that Congress convenes and they say, wow, look we're in a very big emergency. We started the year on high hopes, and we saw some really encouraging data that showed that the economy fundamentals were sound, that inflation was moderating and things were getting under control. You'll hear President Biden continue to talk about how he's done a lot to reduce the deficit when he really hasn't, and they're going to keep talking about how inflation is now under control, right? Meanwhile, prices haven't come down. So it has really killed a lot of people. A lot of people. They say pre-pandemic, we're paying 21% more on average, just cost of living, 21% more. And um, pay has only risen, I want to say, what was it, 15 to 16%. So you have like a 7% deficit. You're actually running -7. And that's on the using their cooked numbers side. And I'm sure if we use the real
I
numbers, it
wonder.
would be a lot worse because I feel it. It's a lot worse.
I wonder how many excess deaths are out there that that because there's really no way you can 100% like attribute it, to some of this stuff, but I wonder how many people have exited this plane of existence due to stress, or not having that quality of life that they once had, and they either got sick and were unable to afford their healthcare costs,
Like
or
you mean like root cause. Like, okay, so Joe Schmuckatelli died of heart disease. But what was it that caused this ticker to crap out, you know? Oh, well, Joe Schmuckatelli had was once a very successful guy, but the economy's
yes,
tanked and
as
he's
the
lost his
economy is
quality of
tanked,
life.
yeah,
And oh, by
right.
the way, he's coped with personal tragedy too that sapped away all of his money, and now he's stuck and everything else. So
maybe
so it
maybe
made
his
his ticker
son
burn out.
maybe his son died of a fentanyl overdose or
Or
something. See how, yeah, right, I mean, like, how all of this kind of root cause stuff can lead up to something like that, but that's never going to be represented in the statistics, because how can I mean, it's
not without being
like
extremely intrusive. You can't. Yeah.
correlation kind of thing, but it does make me wonder, this is just compounding the issues of
So
all
here
of
you go.
that,
Is that here's delight. They say it's like 15% excess. Regular, it is 1% or 3.3 million. So think about that. Instead of 1%, 15. That's extremely concerning, but not
that's
unexpected. I got to be I got to be
right,
totally honest. Not unexpected at all. Um, and he's add on the 10 million illegals, and it's way more. And they're hiding all the deaths. Absolutely. Well, I mean, think about it. There are lies, damn lies, and then statistics, right? That's the old Mark Twain saying. And um, you can watch now because of the tools that are out there in real time and just see how they're manipulating things, and it's
hmm
being exposed. Um, since we're talking about manipulation and everything else, maybe it's one of those times to talk about the debt and just how it's going to affect us um, in the not so distant future. We were always talking about. Matter of fact, before we do that, because there's just so much on this. Michael Snyder, economiccollapseblog.com, theeconomicscollapseblog.com, did a great piece on this, on just why so many people are now starting to see the light. So you're going to see also the number one issue that they, when I say that, the Davos people, everything else, the CEOs of America say is the number one problem. That's misinformation. Misinformation is the number one problem.
of course.
Not hunger, not homelessness, not infrastructure failure. No, no, no. Misinformation is the number
these
one
these
issue.
damn pesky people that keep pulling back the curtain and
And really all it is people are suffering so much and they want to know why. They're trying to get to the bottom of why, because humans ultimately are survivors. We are
right.
going to survive when we're going to try like hell. And so we want to understand what the hell's going on and it's going haywire in our lives. And everybody has struggle. I don't know one person that doesn't. Says many among the elite don't really care that tens of millions of Americans on the bottom of the economic food chain are deeply suffering right now. It's being reported that approximately 93%, here it is, of the stock market wealth held by U.S. household is controlled by the top 10%, and the stock market has been performing remarkably well in recent months. And as long as their stock portfolios look good, there won't be too much concern about the economic pain that the masses are experiencing, but they should care because what we're witnessing is going to deeply affect us all. And he says 2023, really tough for much of the country. Many of the economic trends from last year just continue to intensify. He uses Southern California as an example where there's been a 60% increase in demand at food banks. He says the nonprofit Second Harvest Food Bank in Orange County, which provides food for 400,000 people a month in Orange County, seen a 60% increase in demand since the pandemic. And the Big Apple, they said they were forced people to turn away. And a lot of that has to do with the illegal immigration. You had at Thanksgiving, low income families that normally depend on these kinds of services to get their turkeys and their food um, were turned away because they ran out because of the influx in migrants. Again, it's not to say that human beings that are suffering don't need help, but this is something that should have been much better controlled that was not. And all they had to do was follow the law. It says the shelves at the Bronx Food Pantry have been bare for the past 2 weeks as hungry New Yorkers face heightened food insecurity at the beginning of the new year. The Albanian American Open Hand Association, located at Pelham Parkway, fed about 800 weekly before the pandemic. That's now since doubled. And for the first time in 10 years, the pantry's been forced to turn people away. So, of course, it's going to be something that's increasingly common. He goes on to say from coast to coast, donations are down and food costs are up. And so in the months ahead, more desperate Americans that have lined up for food for hours are going to be told no food today. And despite all the happy talk, he says, that we're constantly getting from the Biden administration and the mainstream media, that the truth is that poverty is truly exploding. Homelessness has been growing faster than ever before. Says here the 2023 annual homeless assessment report shows that more than 653,000 people were experiencing homelessness in the U.S., marking a 12% increase from 2022. The report used compiled point-in-time count data, a method that attempts to count every person living homeless one day out of the year from across the nation to track the ebbs and flows of the national homeless crisis. But of course, that is probably woefully underreported.
Oh, definitely.
As a matter
I'm
of fact,
sure those numbers are way higher than
way
what
higher,
they.
way higher. And you
Yeah.
could do your own life experience can help and explain that in your head and come up with your own number. So it says, unfortunately, our economic problems appear to be accelerating. According to the government's own numbers, the U.S. lost a whopping 1.531 million full-time jobs in December alone. And layoffs continue to be announced at a furious pace. So you had Pixar Studios, they cut jobs. TechCrunch said that Pixar was set to undergo layoffs as high as 20% of their workforce. And Twitch is laying off people. Twitch announced it was going to cut off 30 or 35% of its workforce. Google's laid off hundreds of staff across the company as it tries to cut costs and focus on artificial intelligence. So they're looking at laying off 1,000 people. And he says, welcome to 2024. It's going to be a crazy year. And as more and more companies lay off workers, large number of Americans won't be able to pay their bills. In fact, credit card delinquency rates are at stages that have already surpassed pandemic levels. And don't let anybody tell you, he says, that the economy is in good shape. Michael ends, the elite may be doing just fine for the moment, but most of the country is really struggling. And do you remember the tremendous suffering we witnessed during the Great Recession? Well, guess what? It's going to be worse. It's going to be worse. And so when you think about this, that we hit $34 trillion on January 3rd or 2nd, so right after the new year. And it's going to take, if we continue on the spending pace we're going, it's going to take 81 days to rack up another $1 trillion in debt. And we'll be at 35 trillion. That's how fast we're accumulating debt. And I want to say it took 212 years for us to get the first trillion.
Seems like we're starting to ride on this exponential curve, like that's accelerating more and more and more every year, and
man, I agree.
It's not
really
looking
concerning.
good.
Zero Hedge had a great visualization of this, and I'm going to throw it up on the screen now so people can see it, because it'll really blow you away just how bad.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Things are good. And I know a lot of people say, well, it's fiat and we can just make it all disappear. Yeah, we could do that. Um, feasibly, we could, in theory, close the borders and utilize the natural resources of the United States, and we could live and survive and be okay. You couldn't have the life you have now. You couldn't live like all the McMansions and everything else that the 21st century has kind of brought about.
But the United States does have all of the core
We
resources
have all
that
the core resources.
a civilization or society would need, and we do not have to depend on any other country to
No,
sustain ourselves
we have
at all.
plenty. We can have and do have virtually unlimited energy and could tap into that and be energy independent. But we choose not to. And
Right.
so, and that's the thing to understand more than anything else is that we have a choice. And we're not being given that choice. And instead, what you have being thrown at you is a bunch of green bullshit that is doing nothing but enriching special interests, enriching the Al Gores and all of the Davos and the Bilderbergers and all of these,
Come on,
this
Joe.
small
You
group
can't
of
go.
dominant men.
You can't go, drilling out in the forest because there's a special beaver out there that has a unique tail, and if we disturb its habitat,
Until the micronova comes and torches the beaver, and then it doesn't
right.
matter. So you see, it's like we could be real with ourselves and say, well, chances are in about 50 years or so, if we are really true about all the earth changes that are going on, and we'll talk a little bit about that in hour two, um, about the crazy weather. If we're honest about that and what's causing it, then we really don't care about the beaver right now. What we care about is making sure that humanity comes together and solves a very big problem that faces humanity and does it in a way that brings us together instead of rips us apart or destroys us. That's really what we should be doing. And so
Right.
they think they have a plan and they're trying to dictate it to 9 billion people that all have free will, whether you like it or not. And it's very difficult to do. So this is a great visualization here of the debt. This is why this is going to become a problem that they're going to have to address sooner rather than later. And if you think about it, right now they have 6 interest rate cuts scheduled for 2024. And so if you do what you're doing now, which by the way, inflation actually increased a little bit in December. So it actually went up instead of staying neutral or going down. And that was a bad sign. But they know that they can't sustain 5% interest rates. And I've talked about this ad nauseum in the past, that if we just had 5% interest rates, and we monetize the national debt, and at that time when I first gave that statistic, the national debt was like $20 trillion. It would take 90% of the income tax to do that. And so what do you think $34 trillion is going to be at 5%? And that's why you see the debt going up so fast, is because they have to play tricks in order to do it, because they cannot possibly take in enough money fast enough without drastically raising income taxes to even think about paying down the national debt. I mean, the interest is going to be a problem enough. So they're using a lot of sleight of hand tricks in order to do it. They're using accounting magic, and they're trying to, like I said, to kick the can down the road as much as they can. So they go and they start lowering interest rates. What do you think that's going to do? That's going to spur spending. And when you spur spending, and it's not us that's spending, the 90% of Americans are broke. We're not spending, we're surviving. it's the top 10%. Now they're going to drive up inflation again. And what's going to happen that time? Well, there seems to be no real solution. So we have to think out of the box, folks. This is a real crisis, you know? So what we're going to do is we're going to give you 3% for your treasuries that we're going to put in your 401k account in place of your cash. But you're doing a public service. You are being a patriot for the United States and for your fellow countrymen, you see, because your contribution, you're not losing anything. You're making 3%. And it's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. It is the safest thing, my friends, that you can possibly get. So we're going to take that for everybody that is 50 and younger. We're going to replace your 401k with treasury bonds and just slightly tweak the way that we do this. And you're going to do your public service. And so that's going to lower the amount of interest rates, the amount of interest, the national debt, and all this stuff. And, it's going to give them a little more time. 2030-ish. And then that's when the real solution kicks in. And that's your smart cities. You have to manage people. You have to manage resources. We have a power issue. Look at Texas. They're talking about record cold down in Texas. Can the Texas power grid handle it? Well, it sure as hell better be able to handle it. And if it can't, why? The state of Connecticut, 50% of the power generation in Connecticut, and I think close to that in Massachusetts, solar. Well, what happens if it's cloudy for 2 weeks? Have you noticed the weather's wacky? Why are we depending on solar? Why are we thinking that crazy crap isn't going to happen? You know what I mean? It's it's stupid. But let's shutter the coal plants and all the natural gas plants because nothing could ever possibly happen or go wrong there. Do you not see how stupid it is? You cannot have the best interest of people and leave your population exposed like that. It flies in the face of who we are as humans.
Yeah,
We're survivors.
Energy resources would be like your one of your core fundamental bedrocks of a stable society, right? And a functioning civilization. And if you make that uh, a scarce resource or something that is not guaranteed, then your whole kind of foundation of a stable society is in jeopardy at that point, right? So yeah, you would think that would be like the main core thing of, hey, let's make sure that we are completely energy stable, energy independent, and oh, you're muted.
Oh, pardon me. That's numero uno, trumps everything. Absolutely.
Right.
Has to be.
Yep.
Has to be, because without energy, you can't get anything. You can't plant. You might as well plant food by hand. You
can't
know?
produce. You can't produce
you can't
things.
produce nothing.
Yeah.
You can't mine. You can't do anything. So you have to have energy. That's step one. Step one. So if you strangle yourself, well, we're going solar because the carbon. Dude, we'll live with it. We'll figure it out. If the oceans are going to rise, we'll move the population into where they can. I think we've got enough land. I think we can handle it. I don't understand also why, and we'll get into this a little more in hour number 2. I can't understand why people don't understand how easy it is to actually affect change without having to, well, we need militias. Well, we need this. Well, we need that. No, we don't. No, we don't. All we need to do is sit on our hands. If all we did was just sit on our hands for 2 weeks, we'd get this whole thing under control. You do nothing and you shut everything down, they will listen. and they don't have to blow people up, and they don't have to do it. Now, they may try that. I don't know. Force people to work, force labor. But again, here in the United States, are your brothers and sisters?
Yeah, you'd be amazed by the power that the word no has.
No, that's right. No, I do not consent. Nope, not going to do it. Not going to do it. That's all you got to say. And you know what? After a couple of weeks of not doing anything and production collapsing, productive capacity collapsing, they will change. They will have to change. So you can do it without lifting a finger. And that was Gandhi taught us that in recent history, when you just take the nonviolent route. Yeah, they'll probably hose you down, unleash dogs on you, they'll spray you, they'll shoot you. Sure, but you don't have to consent, and you don't have to do anything. Just don't do it. Don't participate. And the system comes crashing down, because up till now, to present day, it still relies on human productivity to keep the economy afloat and keep it moving. So could you imagine,
and that's why they're in such a rush to get AI to start managing and handling all this stuff. And yeah, so we'll get more into it whenever we get back from the break.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're going to break. When we come back, hour number 2 of the Freedom Link right here on KGRA, KGRADB.com. Don't go away.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Did you know 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated? If you struggle with focus, run low on energy, or when it's time to finally sleep, you simply can't, this can all be linked to dehydration, and Fuel Up has the answer. Our proprietary formula contains the finest cellular hydration with the strongest immune-enhancing natural ingredients. The Fuel Up system is made up of 3 different incredibly tasting varieties. Wake kickstarts your day with a jolt of caffeine. Play boosts focus while hydrating your cells. Rest not only helps you relax, but also rejuvenates your cells while you sleep. Here's what our clients have to say.
I really don't miss my coffee, and you can tell the difference.
So I'm going to take it for the energy. I'm going to take it for the play. I'm going to take it, all day.
And it works. That's the thing. It works. We love it.
Take the Fuel Up Challenge now, where we offer a Feel the Difference money-back guarantee. Fuel Up for life.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected. Only at kgradb.com.
Welcome back. It's hour number 2 of the Freedom Link here on KGRA, KGRADB.com. Don't forget to tell your peeps out there, all your friends, when you're talking at the water fountain at work, hey, I just I know this up and coming digital broadcasting station there. You should take a listen, tune into it. Educate some people, you know? And we're talking about some education here with the debt because it will be a problem. It's going to be a problem. You can't not have a problem when, and they say, oh, that's funny money. Yeah, it's funny money to a point, but it all the fundamentals of things are, and when you hear that, the fundamentals of the economy are sound, that basically is, the numbers that
it's funny money that unfortunately the entire system runs
it
on
runs on
currently.
and
So
relies on. There's just not enough Bitcoin out there yet. Right. And so,
right.
so look at this. This is a great illustration of this. And I suggest everybody head over to Zero Hedge and check this article out so you can digest it a little more and maybe study it a bit because it really is and shows how the debt will spiral out of control. And you can see it here. So it says U.S. Treasury has a morbid habit of revealing big round numbers of debt around major calendar milestones. And the new 2024 year was no different because, according to the latest Treasury Daily Statement published after the close today, this is on January 3rd, and reflecting the U.S. Treasury's financial statements as of December 29th, total U.S. debt as of the end of the year was just over $34 trillion for the first time ever. And so he gives you the number to be precise. Now, so since this is a topic that they've covered for 15 years, anybody, independent media has beat this over the head like until it's dead a million times over. Says we don't need to say much about suffice to show a chart of total U.S. debt since Zero Hedge launched in 2009. This just goes to show you in 2009 the national debt was $10.6 trillion. So it has gone up $24 trillion since
Right.
2009.
Because I mean, this has been going up so fast. I remember when people were talking about it being at 15 trillion. Remember? And then
Jeez. I remember
we've
when Reagan was
blown that
running
out.
deficits, and it was like Reagan's running a $6 billion deficit this year. They call it trickle down economics, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, wow. Could you imagine if we just had $6 billion deficit? Golly. So here's some context. It says right here, the U.S. debt increased by $1 trillion in the past 3 months, $2 trillion in the past 6 months, $4 trillion in the past 2 years, and $11 trillion in the past 4 years.
Oh,
And,
that
and
almost
so
sounds
on.
like it sounds very close to exponential growth. If you want to
Does it
look
not?
at
I
that,
mean, that's pretty
it's
visually compelling, I would say. And
yep.
so at this point, it says everybody knows how this ends. And you would have to think that the Congressional Budget Office does. You would have to think so, right? And so he gives a chart. In CBO projections, primary deficits exceed their historical 50-year average of 1.5% of GDP through the projection period. In 2053, the primary deficit equals 3.3% of GDP, driven up by large and sustained primary deficits and by rising interest rates. Net interest outlays reach 6.7% of GDP in 2053. Now, let me ask you something. How in the hell do these people know that their interest outlays are going to be 6.7% of GDP in 2053? How do they know what interest rates are? How do they even know if we're going to have interest rates? How do they
Right.
know what the hell we're going to be doing in 2053? So
I
this
mean,
is,
I guess they're just kind of maybe extrapolating from where we're at now and based on
I
the
guess so.
current
And like if
current
things
trend,
were to be a current trend and go on through this period,
Right.
but that's the problem is that humanity doesn't work that way. But let's just say for the point of argument that it does, that we all seem to be able to just get along enough to maintain the status quo till 2053. Look
I
at
mean, but
this.
if we've learned
Do
anything,
you see this?
things tend to accelerate much quicker than what we've envisioned, right? So
Thank you. Take take
this could
take the tricorder, right? Or
right.
the communicator in Star Trek that they envisioned would be a 23rd or 24th century technology. And we've already blown it out of the water. We've already blown it out of the water. So
yeah, we already blew it out of the water with our Nokias. So
what a great example, and you're absolutely spot on. So this is why I'm saying it's not going to be 2053. It's going to be 2025, 2026, if not sooner. And they're going to have to do something to intervene. And it can't be printing money. What happens when that happens? Well, take a look at President Milei down in Argentina and what he's doing and what those people are going to have to suffer through and what they have suffered through. Argentina was arguably the strongest economy at the turn of the 20th century. They were the top economy in the world. Argentina.
Yeah.
And look at where they are now. Why? Deficit spending. Socialism. When you take personal responsibility,
they ended up tapping themselves out. Basically.
You take personal responsibility and accountability away, and you replace it with happy-go-lucky, happy-feely, wokey, crazy stuff. It inevitably will always lead to collapse. That's what we've seen. History has a pretty good record on that now, that you can have all the best intentions, but what you lack on the macro for a socialistic system is accountability. And you can't have a system like that and have it be fair, because ultimately you're going to have corrupt individuals that take advantage, that steal, and do all this stuff that ruin it for everybody else. On a micro, absolutely. That's why you have communes on the micro, communism on the macro. Communes typically work. Communists, bad. Doesn't work. Why?
Right.
Accountability. You can't possibly keep track of everything that's going on because the system gets so goddamn big that it just eats itself alive. And that's where we're at now. And it's just going to be a painful ride to the bottom. And then once you get there, you are witnessing right now in Argentina what will happen here if we decide that we want to fix it and move on in a more libertarian type sense, if you will.
Right.
And he's gonna have the fight of all fights to do it.
Right. In order to fix these issues, you have to tear the Band-Aid off, and it's gonna hurt for a little bit. But
right.
And
that's assuming that everybody goes along with it and plays ball. But down in Argentina, your largest political party is employees unions. Those are that they control the country, which is why it's had the socialist track that it has. And because of that, Scotty, you don't have the support that he needs in the legislative branch to
it's gonna be tough for him to get a lot of the things done because
But if you had the kumbaya scenario, he projects that in like 2 years they would be through the worst of it. But it would take it would be a very, very, very it's going to be a very, very painful couple of years. Right now, they're running at 140%. They project by year end 200% interest rates, or 200% inflation, because you have to devalue the peso. And when you do that, costs go up. The peso is worth less, therefore things cost more pesos. And they're actually talking about printing bigger bills. That's not because they're printing money to pay for debt. No, what they're doing is they're trying to right the ship because things have been artificially propped up and artificially regulated for too long. And then it's taking everything that was nationalized and privatizing it again. So it's a hellacious process. It's going to be a damn painful process. But Argentina was arguably one of the most prosperous countries at the turn of the 20th century. So
yeah, if they can pull it off, we could definitely see the return of Argentina as being major economic power
You could,
again.
you could if everything
If
breaks that
they're
way.
able to, yeah, if they're able to do it, and it all works out.
They're another country with tremendous resources. And again, it's the resources. If you have resources, you can inevitably become very powerful. So it says, but since there's no way to reverse this catastrophic outcome, and there's not a way to reverse it. They are not going to do the things that are necessary, and they're going to ride this thing all the way down. At best, one may only prepare for the inevitable hyperinflationary outcome, which would be good news to what is now over $1 trillion in interest expense. After all, someone has to devalue the currency. All that interest is payable in. And that's right. That's what they're going to do. Right now, the U.S. interest expense, $1.505 trillion. It's over $1 trillion just in interest. Let's think about this for a second. The entire military budget is $860 billion. So we're paying more in interest in the national debt than we are for the entire military industrial complex, or at least the one that's reported. That's insane. Yeah, now think about this. And since there's no longer a way out, we may as well also joke about, and so consider this. In the third quarter, when U.S. GDP supposedly grew at a 4.9% annual rate, hardly the stuff of recessions, rising $547 billion in nominal, not real dollars, the U.S. budget deficit increased by a whopping $622 billion. So we grew the economy by $547 billion in quarter three, but it took $621 billion of debt to get that. Because guess what? That money went to the military industrial complex that got jobs. You have the government. It is hiring. It's got more people working for it than ever before. You've got more public sector people working than ever before. I mean, it's ridiculous. This is what happened with Rome, but that's another great graphic to show you. And he says this not only explains where U.S. growth has come from, but begs the question, just how much debt will be needed when the U.S. does fall into recession? Or actually not, because at this point, the best anyone can do is polish the brass on the Titanic while waiting for the inevitable captures so vividly by this following endgame chart. So let me see if I can zoom in a little bit on this so that everybody can see this lovely, lovely chart right here. So let's see. Whoops, that's a little too much. Boom. So this is the U.S. debt to GDP is on a path to uncharted territory. Here's 1790, right? This right here is the U.S. federal debt held by the public percentage of GDP. So this is our percentage, 0 to 300%. Here's your timeline. Here we are today, 98%. World War II, we were at 102% of GDP. That's when they said, oh my God, we're bankrupt. We're never going to make it. And so they basically put the Social Security system in place, not only to provide retirement, but it was also to give Americans a serial number because you became assets of the corporation. And at that point, you were basically what saved the corporation from inevitable bankruptcy as a result of World War II through the Social Security program. So that saved us. That kicked that can down the road a little bit. And also 90% tax rates. That sure did it too. Don't think for a second that is off the table. It most certainly can be, because people that are in power are going to fight like hell to stay in power. They do not want to lose power, nor do they want to be the person that's going to be the loser, right? You don't want to be the loser. So U.S. Civil War, about 40%. World War I, about 40%, spiked at 102. Then we have all this big drop. 90% tax rates. Yay. Bretton Woods, around 1972. We take ourselves off the gold standard. We kind of move on here. Hyperinflation hits in the 80s. And then we have Reagan. So Reagan here starts our trajectory upward, and the Bush years. Then Clinton goes ahead and actually creates budget surpluses through tax increases. He also was kind of like the reverse. He was like the Democrat towards the end. Whether it was trying to save face because of the scandals or what, I don't know. But I can tell you, when he left office, the government actually had a surplus. Then you pass the dot-com bubble, and then we start the inevitable rise right after the 2006-2008 Great Recession. Whoop, and here we go. And look at this is how we project things here. This is 132%.
Well, you really also start to see the acceleration of that around 2001 when a certain event got us involved in
9/11. Yes, and of course all the government spending and everything else. But look at here, 130%. This blue here is the if Social Security payments are cut, this is how the debt would trend if you cut that, right? This is a baseline, 181%. So if things remain status quo, baseline, 181%. This is where we'll be in 2050 at 150% of GDP. Now, if average revenue and discretionary spending stay totally average, 250% of GDP.
Wow.
If it does that, and then the CBO baseline rates, which are basically today's rate, and you add 2.5% to that, so 300% of GDP. And of course, none of this is sustainable. So I think this is a great, great piece to understand just how bad we really are. And we're running this debt when feasibly there's nothing wrong. We're in great shape, they say. So if we're in great shape, why all the government assistance? Why all the government debt? Doesn't make any sense. Very interesting. And that leads to the terrible push right now to snuff out independent media. And it's kind of like how the Saudis intervene in the oil industry, where if they start to lose control in pricing because the American refiners and producers start putting a dent into or flooding the system with supply, then they flood it with supply and they crash the market to get the American producers who can't produce as cheaply as them out of the market. And then that allows for their prices to stabilize, and they play the long game and they survive. Well, the control freaks do the same thing, and the mainstream media has traditionally been their way to do it. And the mainstream media has effectively lost all their power. So knowing that, they've gone down the route of trying to manage and censor social media and using the disinformation and misinformation, excuse to do so. And it's all because, the mainstream media doesn't tell you the truth. So people are going and researching the stuff themselves and then sharing the information across social media. Some of it's accurate, some of it isn't. It's all conversation, really, if you think about it. But it's that discourse that is creating their instability, and they don't like it. So they have effectively said that it is their number one problem that they're facing is fake news. Listen to this. This is the activist post. I want to say fake news is what worries the World Economic Forum the most, and Ali too. It says the WEF is afraid of losing control of the great narrative. So this will be the major theme at this year's meeting in Davos. They are deathly afraid of nations electing populist leaders, and in the Netherlands, I think they got the far right, what they say, the far right guy now. In France, you've got Macron that is not doing well, and if anybody, I'll tell you what.
And then look at Argentina. And
Argentina,
I'm sure they're not happy. They're not happy about that situation. So,
and I mean, Donald Trump, he was a president once. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe he is again. Maybe somebody else. Maybe an RFK Jr. Who knows? But they say disinformation, misinformation, and fake news are blamed for leading people astray, as if they are unable to come to the right consensus on their own. So, um, go to activist posts, look up fake news is what worries WEF the most. And there's a 7-minute interview with the World Economic Forum's Zahidi, who says that that's their top priority. Bloomberg News did the interview, and it should be a very, very insightful interview for you to understand why they feel that way. And this isn't the first time where they've tried to cut the legs out from underneath the things that they like to control. So when you have mainstream media, we had the first iteration of independent media. And when we did that, you had success. So they introduced monetization and they got people hooked on the easy money. And then let it foment a few years, did the Saudi thing. Flood the market like they did. Well, they let it go, let it go, let it go. And you had a lot of independent media organizations and people do very well doing that. And then they started the misinformation, disinformation, the Orwellian newspeak police, and they pulled the legs out from underneath all these people and they destroyed them and really set back the independent media big time to where they had to go back to that traditional pound the pavement type of thing if you needed sponsors or support to get off the ground. Well, then you had organizations start up the crowdfunding. Crowdfunding became huge. And, the chats with the donations and the things like that really helped to breathe life back into independent media, because you took that power away from the Googles and the Facebooks and you put it in the hands of the Rumbles and the other types of platforms that allowed for that. And it really became a second renaissance for the independent media, which is where we're here now. Well, now you've got AI entering the game, and it's a tool for both sides, right? It's a tool for
Right.
independent media. It's also a tool for the mainstream media. It's also a tool for the control freaks. And it's how it's managed. It's how it's used. Everybody's going to use it, and everybody jockeys for position. But the one thing that they can't control is reality, is what is in front of us. What are we feeling? What are you experiencing day to day? And the problem is independent media corroborates and people can relate to other people instead of these personalities that are put out there. Like, you don't have the cult of personality anymore that used to exist, where the Walter Cronkites they were praised, they were hero worshipped when all they did was
Yeah,
read a teleprompter for 40
and
years,
people don't want to see some fake vapid, news reporter who probably has never experienced, half of what, the person they're trying to report to has experienced, and then trying to be relatable, and everything is just so phony and fake and whatnot, and people are just tuning out of it, and they know it's all BS and that they're just trying to push an agenda on you. It's not even really news anymore. It's just state-sponsored propaganda or corporate-sponsored propaganda, right? And so, like I said earlier, everyone's just like, nah, they see it for what it is now, and they go and get all of their information online. Now, is that a double-edged sword? Of course. I mean, of course it's a double-edged sword, because, like you said, you have to be discerning, and you have to,
you just said it best.
You have to trust that the person is smart enough to at least, do a little bit of research and verify what they're reading. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there who are very easily duped by fake news and fake headlines and AI generated images and stuff like that. I mean, that's just the nature.
And people were duped by duck and cover. Think about that.
Right, but it's always been like. it's always been like that all throughout humanity. There's always going to be some sucker that falls for something, that gets scammed, or a con man, comes by and gives them an elaborate story and, swindles them out of some money, or, dupes them for something. That's just how it is,
But your
but,
own government was telling you to duck and cover.
right.
You know what I mean? How in the
Right.
hell can you take them seriously after something like that? Oh, okay, let's get under our desks. Well, Johnny's doing it. Sally's doing it. I might as well do it, right? It's easier to go with the flow. It's easier to go with the flow.
Hey,
Know?
we all know that wooden desk is going to protect you just fine from a 10 kiloton nuclear hydrogen bomb. So.
It's unbelievable, and but people, like I said, people have lost faith in, and this is this is language that I think has fallen out of favor with the public. People have lost faith in our government institutions. Well, when you think of institution, you think of institutionalization, right? And institutionalization is often described as imprisoned, right? You are institutionalized. Well, more and more people feel that they are institutionalized, and they view those institutions as being the prison walls. More and more people do. And I'd be honest with you, I feel that way. I've felt that way for a long time.
Well, and not only that, people used to live under the illusion, if you will, or at least had at least the feeling or some confidence that the government was there, with their best interests in heart, which it's obvious now that the government does not have your best interest in heart, and so people can see that for what it is. They know that the government doesn't care about them.
No,
that anything the government
they only have their special interest at heart, not your interest.
Right. And so how are you going to have any sort of confidence or faith in an institution that is, first of all, doesn't care about you, and in a lot of cases actively works against your best interests? So
you can't. And so that's why it's so important that you yourself ask those questions. Ask yourself, ask others these very important questions. Hey, is what we're seeing, is that real? Are these prices really going up that fast? Do we need to accept that? We don't. We don't need to accept it. It's not okay. Anybody that tells you that is disconnected, totally disconnected. And quite frankly, I haven't run into anybody that I know that thinks it is okay. The only ones that do are the idiots on the idiot box. And honest to God, because they're the only ones preaching it. Oh, yes, the fundamental. I'll never forget Bush, right before the Lehman Brothers crash. And it was, right before the election. McCain was running for president. Obama was running for president, first term. And he came on from the White House. He was behind the fireplaces behind him. The fundamentals of the economy are sound. And, independent media at the time just had a field day with this, because it's like,
oh, I remember.
Are you freaking nuts, dude? How can you say that? It's going off the rails. And sure enough, 6 months later, it did.
I thought, I forgot his name. He ran Trends Research. I thought he was about to have a aneurysm when Bush said that.
Oh, yeah. What the heck was his name? I can't remember his stinking name now, but I see the face. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to make fun of him a lot.
Yeah.
But you're right. You're right. It is.
Everybody had a field day with that. It was like, wow, he really just said that.
And so here's the thing. So you have an election coming up, right? And this is what makes this election so volatile. And in the grand scheme of things, this is the D news, if you will. On the ballot in Iowa, fear, anxiety, and hopelessness. Yeah, I'd say so. Why would there be hopelessness and fear and anxiety? Well, if you take a look at what we're facing collectively as a country, we have no control of our government as it stands. We do. We have total control of our government, but we choose to let our government run amok. We do. And so, in the very short period of time since the year changed from 2023 to 2024, we've seen the debt continue to skyrocket. We've seen our military now launch attacks in Yemen that we can't afford. We have continued to do our Ukraine thing. I'm sure they're getting money in there somehow, probably CIA, dark stuff. You know that stuff's happening.
Yeah, I was just about to say,
we're not stupid.
Since the spigots have technically turned off for Ukraine, they're going to be tapping into a lot of that CIA dark cash, a lot of that
whatever. But you know
stuff that's off the books.
Or you're going to get an event that they think is going to foment support for continued action in Ukraine. But for whatever, you got that going on. You've got Israel. That if that expands, that's interesting. That right there is the one that I'm paying attention to the most right now.
Yeah, because that one, I am too, because it seemed like that one kind of came out of left field, right? You know, like, okay, we had the Ukraine thing going on, and that's been bubbling and fomenting for quite a few years. And of course, we all know that the Middle East is always it's always kind of a hot spot and unstable there. But the way the whole Hamas Israel thing has kind of spiraled into a more generalized regional situation, to where now you got the Houthis in Yemen that are starting to come out of the woodwork, and Iran's getting a little more belligerent in all of this, and all of that, and that could have just that attack by Hamas just could have been the catalyst for something that's going to end up snowballing into something much larger.
Well, it could very well be, and some of the things that concern me, of course, is they're launching attacks now. Turkey just launched a series of attacks in Iraq and Syria because they say some terrorists attacked and killed some Turkish troops.
And not only that, wasn't there some like huge bombing in Iran when they were holding the celebration for General, what was his name? The general that
the one that was assassinated by Trump.
The one that Trump killed. They always hold some kind of a celebration of life or something for him.
Right.
I guess every year since it happened, there was a bombing. I think that killed like 100 people or something.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
And ISIS claimed responsibility for it. So ISIS has come out. They're not gone, and they.
But who controls them? Right? Because because how did PNAC and the Bush administration.
Right. I found.
How
that's
did they know that Bin Laden's gonna?
I found it very interesting that now all of a sudden, Iran's kind of getting belligerent and all this, and all of a sudden, boom, you have a bombing in Iran, and ISIS claims responsibility. But remember, during the whole Syria situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we were, backing the quote-unquote freedom fighters and rebels in Syria, how the lines between those freedom fighters and those rebels and ISIS fighters was extremely blurry. And were they really freedom fighters or rebels? And we were, remember, we were funding and providing support and weapons, and all of a sudden there was mysterious weapons drops. Oops, what an accident that landed over there at an ISIS position, and because ISIS and the quote unquote rebels, let's be honest, were one and the same, they had to make a distinction in order to get the public support for it, because obviously the public is not going to support funding ISIS, fighting against al-Assad. But if you all of a sudden rename them to, well, they're freedom fighters and rebels, they're not ISIS or someone else, so
the other thing, and the other thing I want you to pay attention to as you go about your daily lives is how many times you hear the term or the concept of safe for democracy. So, or that democracy is under
oh my
threat or
God.
at stake. Now, that was, believe it or not, when I tell you they use the same playbook that they've used
Every time I hear them say that, it makes me want to throw up because I see what they're doing.
Bernays spoke
Right.
of that as one of his crowning achievements back in 1917 when Woodrow Wilson was trying to drum up interest for the entry of the United States into World War I. Bernays was one of his advisors that was part of the new government office for public relations. And when Wilson needed to get this message out, Bernays consulted a lot of top psychoanalysts, drew on the expertise of his uncle Sigmund Freud, and came up with the slogan, make the world safe for democracy. Making the world safe for democracy. That is what the call was that was put up all over Europe.
Right, because
and
first of
it was
all,
the messaging, but it had nothing to do with that.
Right. I mean, but it's a galvanizing term because everybody is taught that democracy is the foundation of Western civilization. And so if there's anything out there that threatens democracy, well, by golly, you're threatening the very core of Western civilization, the very fabric of society, right? So
I just want to point that out, that you have to pay attention to the language they're using, because that very language is manipulating you. It's manipulating your emotion. They use these very, very cutting, I don't want to say cutting edge, they've been around for a long time, but very effective techniques, because they know how the human brain operates. And so they're going to take advantage of that. Another gentleman, and I'll look him up. Matter of fact, I'm going to look him up now while we're discussing this, is a guy by the name of Clotaire Rapaille. And you may have heard me use his name before. And I am going to look up, see if he's got anything short on, yes, why your brand needs a village of. Okay, so this is the guy. This guy right here is the guy that has claimed, and has for years claimed to have unlocked the human psyche, and has been on every Fortune 500, been hired by them, and demands no less than 7 figures. And he's an old codger now, but my God, I mean, this guy has done some unbelievable stuff, and you've seen his work everywhere, and you've probably been manipulated by him a million times and have no idea that you have. And so I'm going to share a video with you guys right now. And this is just him talking about how your brand needs a village of origin. But these are just, he focuses it on big corporations and branding, but it's how to get that brand out there and in the minds and the psyche of people. That's what he focuses on. And I think that we can have a big, like a true awakening moment, honestly, if we just understood who the control freaks were and where they get their information from and where they get their techniques from. So I'm going to show you one of the key people that have been doing this for a very long time, quite frankly, and have kind of built upon that knowledge from the Trotters and the Labans to the Bernays to Rapai and everybody in between. Wait till you see and hear this guy, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Here he is.
In order for a product or a brand to go global, it needs a village of origin. When I say village of origin, it doesn't have to be a real village. When I did the code for Jack Daniels, around the world, people knew that they were like from Tennessee, you see. So I was in Russia, and young people told me, oh, we love Jack Daniels, but we hate the Americans. And I say, okay, so you drink Jack Daniels? Yeah, but it's not American, it's Tennessee. Oh, okay. So the village of origin is a place where you belong, where you have some values, old craftsmanship and something that comes with a tradition. And so something you have to bring to the world that is very unique, a value, an art, a talent that you have in this region. But then you should be proud of this village of origin and promote it. Today, we have a new trend that is very important, is deglobalization. Globalization is over, is passé, is finished. We have protectionism. We have defense of nationalities. We have this is a whole new movement around here that because globalization was not respecting these differences and trying to make a mashed potato out of it. Yeah? And so today, all this little village of origin, all these little cultures are fighting back. They want to defend their own value, their own code, their own culture code. And this is why we have deglobalization. We need to move to a notion of respecting the cultures, respecting every culture as something to bring to the global world, but we need to respect the uniqueness of each of these cultures. So the next step is not going to be globalization. It's going to be the united culture of the planet together, sharing what they have done the best, what they can contribute the best to each other.
So there's a little snippet. This guy, if you go on his channel, now look at, he's only got 5,000 subscribers, and that has been basically the amount of subscribers this poor guy has had. And I don't say poor, he's obviously stinking rich, but he doesn't get a lot of attention. He goes to these conventions, and people are just in awe by him. But I'm telling you right now, that right there, what you just saw and what he's putting out there, and check it out. This is another great, let me go here and show you guys, because this is homework.
That was kind of wild how he jumped from Jack Daniels to globalization pretty quickly. I was like,
because he used a traditional company to show what that is. That is something that Jack Daniels drinkers, people are very passionate about that brand.
Right.
They are, and that's what he's. So when he's saying that, and you just heard a global culture.
He was pointing out how the Russians, they identified more with the Tennessee sort of local aspect of it, coming from a Tennessee farm or, as opposed to, well, it just comes from the United States. They're like, well, we don't like the United States. We're into like this local little area that the whiskey is coming from. And So
if
yeah,
you
very
want to
interesting.
understand that, then you would watch
Consider that
his next video is talking about deglobalization and cultures, Brand Week 2019 in Turkey. And that's what they do. They all converge on these places, all these big corporations, and he goes and he does these workshops with them. And from there, they take their notes and then they deploy it all over the world. And so when you talk about that, start watching the messaging and the what you see on TV, what you see in social media, all of the things that leaders are saying, and watch and see if there's a culture component to it where
Right.
where everybody is unique and is a contributor through the unique culture. Think about what DEI says. Now, DEI, that's one of the critical components to DEI, is it's centered around the fact that everybody comes from a culture that has different life experiences, different ways of doing things. And by bringing people together of different cultures, you can enrich that experience. Now you're bringing about the collective life experience of humanity, for lack of a better term. You're basically taking all of that expertise, all of the different ways of doing things, all of the different beliefs, all of the different, and you're mashing them together in the hopes that everybody's going to sing kumbaya, but that's just not the case. People
No.
have an allegiance to their cultures, to their way of life, to the things that make them special. And there's some things or brands that are important to those cultures, like like Goya, right? Goya is a huge brand for Latinos and Latin Americans and everything else. It's a huge brand. There's an identity to that. People tie their identity to these very important cultural brands. And that's what he's saying. We need to make, to understand that everybody's culture is important, but that it plays a role in the overall global culture.
Right.
And that's what DEI is all about. So when you see the DEI push, a lot of that is coming from people like Rapai. Now, Rapai didn't think about it from the terms of, well, whiteness and all that stuff. Look at the guy. If anybody glares at his glaring privilege, right? It's Rapai. I mean, that guy is as a smooth operator as there is. But I'm just telling you, there is a serious mode of control that he wields, and he
Right.
knows it, but he doesn't, all he does is put it out there and then everybody else runs with it.
Hey, he just looks like he's a modern age Bernays, right?
Very much so. Very, very
Right.
much so.
Or our version of Bernays in our modern time, and like you said, I'm sure his influence is seen all over advertising and media, commercials and whatnot, right? I mean, look, okay, so you have like your GMC truck commercial, right? Because it's for the working man down on the farm, and it incenses that culture of the hardworking blue collar guy who's needing his truck to move things around, so it gives you that sense of identity within that culture, that group of people, right? Or just like any other kind of advertising, Taco Bell, trying to advertise to the edgy cool kids who want to go get a snack at Taco Bell, right?
Right.
So it instances this sense of culture around the product, like you said.
So
And
listen to this. This is Bernays. So this is him out of his book Propaganda, which was written in 1928. Modern propaganda is a consistent, enduring effort to create or shape events to influence the relations of the public to an enterprise, idea, or group. This practice of creating circumstances and of creating pictures in the minds of millions of persons is very common. Virtually no important undertaking is now carried out or carried on without it. Whether that enterprise be building a cathedral, endowing a university, marketing a moving picture, floating a large bond issue, or electing a president. Sometimes the effort or the effect on the public is created by a professional propagandist, sometimes by an amateur deputy duped or deputed for the job. But the important thing is that it's a universal and continuous, and in its sum total, it is regimenting the public mind every bit as much as an army regiments the bodies of its soldiers. So vast,
Repetition, repetition, repetition.
says, so vast are the numbers of minds which can be regimented, and so tenacious are they when regimented, that a group at times offers an irresistible pressure before which legislators, editors, and teachers are helpless. The group will cling to its stereotype, as Walter Lippmann calls it, making of those supposedly powerful beings the leaders of public opinion, mere bits of driftwood in the surf. When an imperial wizard, sensing what is happening, or what is perhaps hunger for an ideal, offers a picture of a nation all Nordic and nationalistic, the common man of the older American stock feeling himself elbowed out of his rightful position and prosperity by the newer immigrant stocks, grasps the picture which fits in so neatly with his prejudices and makes it his own. He buys the sheet and pillowcase costume and bands with his fellows by the thousands into a huge group powerful enough to swing state elections and to throw a ponderous monkey wrench into a national convention. In our present social organization, approval of the public is essential to any large undertaking. Hence, a laudable movement may be lost unless it impresses itself on the public mind. Charity, as well as business, had to adopt propaganda, for the public must be regimented into giving money, just as it must be regimented into tuberculosis prophylaxis, the Near East Relief, the Association of the Improvement of the Condition of the Poor in New York, and all the rest have had to work on public opinion just as though they had tubes of toothpaste to sell. We are proud of our diminishing infant death rate, and that too is the work of propaganda. So propaganda does exist on all sides of us, and it does change our mental picture of the world, even if this be unduly pessimistic, and that remains to be proved. The opinion reflects a tendency that is undoubtedly real. In fact, its use is growing, and its efficiency in gaining public support is recognized. So they know that everything that they need to do has to have a concerted propaganda campaign, and one that is, again, centered around that value system, that cultural community, small village type system. And that's what Bernays was saying. That's what Rapai was saying. That's what all of these guys, they've been saying it for a long time, is you have to get back to the reptilian, to the survivability and reproducibility center in order to make it happen. You have to either threaten or encourage those two traits.
Right. And before we go here, I want to point out that, this is why you see all of this division and stuff going on as far as like woke politics and all of that, because you have all these quote unquote marginalized groups, right? That these people feel that they're like a community or a culture of, and they use that propagandist sort of playbook in order to you know push out their messaging and push out their messages and make people feel like they're marginalized, and that this clique, this group of people will accept them and that they're included, and this is their culture and whatnot. And it creates a toxic environment that we're in right now. But unfortunately, we have to go, Mr. Joseph.
Another episode come and gone.
Another
I was looking back in the chat log And you know who did a little cameo there in the old chat room? Was Mel.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, hello.
Yeah. So Mel, if you're listening, long time no see, and thank you very much.
Thank
Yes,
you.
we're still doing this crap. So and much love to you guys, to Aaron and Melissa. So yeah, it was nice to hear from them. We're out of time. Don't forget, support KGRA, KGRADB.com. Become a member today. Please, support those, the companies that support us, and we'll keep on doing this and giving you the good stuff. That's right. We outie. See you later, everybody.
Later.